Hey there, Blip here, and in this video, we will take a massive look at Mythic Plus. There are so many problems in Mythic Plus, and there's not really been any changes that have fixed the core problems Mythic Plus has suffered with for a long time. In Legion, Mythic Plus really popped off as a new form of content players could enjoy, and essentially created the third pillar that makes up World of Warcraft endgame content alongside raids and PvP. However, for one of the three main pillars that holds up this game, it needs a lot more attention and love than it's currently receiving. Let's take a look at the majority of the problems that have arisen to this date and see what needs to change for the future of Mythic Plus to look bright. I am personally not anywhere near as good as the professionals that play in the MDI, but I have my fair share of experience playing in high-end Mythic Plus. Most recently, I've been playing with a good group of friends and guildies that make pushing keys fun. However, the problems are noticeable, and after hearing all of the problems brought up by the top players and some close friends and other people, I thought it would be a good idea to make this video and try to condense the main problems that Mythic Plus suffers from. The first massive problem that Mythic Plus suffers from is progression. Every time you fail a key, you get a completely random key, one difficulty level lower than the one you just completed. This is a massive problem for all Mythic Plus players, simply because it completely ruins the aspect of progressing. You only have one shot at trying to time a key. Mess up by accident somewhere and it's over. This makes it basically impossible to try new tactics or become good at a certain key. It also makes Mythic Plus inaccessible to a large variety of players, simply because the only way to make up for failing a key is to have enough time to spam Mythic Plus all week in hopes of getting the same key again. This is a massive problem. At some point in BFA, there was a bug where you could delete your keystone, and if you were to complete someone else's key while not having a keystone in your inventory, you would all get a keystone one difficulty lower than the one you just completed. This was a huge bug that made Mythic Plus a lot more enjoyable to the Mythic Plus community, as it gave them more options when they would get absolutely awful keys. Although even with this bug, it still wasn't a perfect solution. But here is my question. Why? Why does Blizzard make it harder for Mythic Plus players to progress? The gear you get from Mythic Plus is irrelevant by the time you start pushing high keys, so why are there such harsh restrictions on Mythic Plus? I remember recently, my Mythic Plus team got a 27 Shrine of the Storm key that we wanted to practice and push, but nope. Unfortunately, we had an accident at the start, and that meant that we had to go and learn another key and pray that eventually we would get another 27 Shrine of the Storm. That's a 1 in 11 chance every time we complete a different key. Mind you, to top this all off, completing a key at a 27 difficulty takes between 30 and 40 minutes, and you might even fail some of those. I see Mythic Plus being a lot more competitive if you can stick with the same key until you decide to re-roll it, by finishing the key whether it's timed or not. This way, at least groups can have a goal for that week and keep trying until they either achieve it or have to give up. When they finally overcome that challenge, they will be greeted with a feeling similar to raiding and the challenge from dungeons of old. But ultimately, this change just makes it more reasonable to participate in high-end Mythic Plus. Currently, you have to commit an insane amount of time and preparation to get good at Mythic Plus, simply because of how random and unforgiving keys are. And this change would make everyone's time they invest so much more valuable. No one who pushes a 26 key or higher keys cares about loot. It's a fact. There's no reason to make pushing keys so restrictive, and if loot is such a problem, just cap rewards at the highest weekly difficulty. Now, it's a fact to everyone that Mythic Plus and the Mythic Dungeon Invitational don't exactly line up well together.
When this happens, but it looks like they have addled thugs and assassins in there as well. But it looks like they're able to deal with it efficiently. It might even be what they planned on doing. This is not the normal thing that you see from most teams going for this Peacekeeper strat, but somehow they're pulling it off, and they've...
Oh, look at Blibum go, look at that, he's ramping up, he's starting to get his World Vein out, he's going huge, and Combustion is activated. Look at him burst those 3 mobs, what a big pull. What a great day it is for Mythic Plus pushing. If you were to watch the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, you would see a completely different experience than if you were to go and watch one of these professional players pushing keys on retail. It just doesn't line up at all. It's also true that pushing high-end plus keys is less entertaining to the average viewer than watching the speedruns that go on in the MDI. A popular Mythic Plus personality, JB, brought up a really cool idea in a recent Mythic Plus discussion hosted by Preach. That suggestion was to change Mythic Plus into a speed focus type content similar to challenge mode dungeons. How it would work is that Blizzard would set a key difficulty ceiling, let's say a plus 20 key for this example, and that would be the highest you could push a key. Then instead of the focus being getting a higher key, it would be who could get the fastest time on a plus 20 for every dungeon. Now, I personally think this is a really cool idea. It solves the problem with when you start to push keys too high, to like a plus 30 difficulty. At that level, you start to get one shot by absolutely everything, and it becomes a lot more unforgiving. The only reason you see groups pushing plus 30 keys on retail right now is because of the creative use of dungeon mechanics and people stacking versatile corruption that lets them reach unholy levels of damage reduction. However, I think it would be hard for Blizzard to find the right keystone difficulty to make the switch. I think people also like the difficulty increase of pushing keys to a higher difficulty. So here's my suggestion. Blizzard will select a key difficulty which will transform how pushing keys work. Let's say again, for an example, a plus 20 keystone is when the keys will transform. So whenever you reach a plus 20 keystone, the timers for each dungeon changes. Instead of having between 30 to 40 minutes per dungeon to complete it in time, you now have to complete the dungeons within the free chest timer, so roughly 14 to 16 minutes. Combine this with the change I mentioned before this to key progress and how you'll be able to, keep progressing and learning a key, we have a very entertaining piece of content on our hands. Since the timers will be insanely tight, you'll have to pull off and practice some crazy strategies to get these good times. This also makes it so that you avoid the problem of pushing a key too high to the point where you cannot complete it just because of the scaling. This is because the timers are a lot more strict and it will take a while before people are able to ascend to the next key level. The main thing I love about this change is that it returns the feeling of challenge mode dungeons, which were one of my most favourite pieces of content within an expansion. This change also brings retail Mythic Plus in line with the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. What do you think of this idea? Would you be more interested in playing Mythic Plus if a change like this were to be made? Let me know in the comments, because I would love to hear. Now, personally, I am not a fan of pretty much all of the Mythic Plus affixes, other than the seasonal affix ones of late. They tend to be unbalanced between each other and make certain weeks of Mythic Plus 100% harder than the previous one. Although the main problem I have with affixes is that they water down the feeling of the dungeon. Blizzard puts a lot of work into designing these creative and innovative dungeons, and then we have out of place mechanics like explosive and sanguine going crazy and changing up the feeling of a dungeon. Although I'm sure everyone sees affixes differently. As I mentioned earlier, I loved challenge mode dungeons, and since Mythic Plus replaced this, it's most likely never coming back. If you want to play a difficult dungeon, you have to play it with all of these nasty affixes that don't bring anything enjoyable to the experience. So here's some possible changes I would personally love to see. I would also love to hear if you disagree with me of any of these things I bring up in a minute in the comments. I would like to see affixes reduced drastically. Per keystone, I feel like there should only be one general affix, like explosive or bursting, and then a seasonal affix on top. Looking at beta, Prideful is a fun seasonal affix, and whenever you see people testing or pushing keys, they are doing it with only the new seasonal affix, and there's a very good reason for that. Anyway, let's start with positive affixes. Positive affixes are a really cool idea that instead of making you view every dungeon in a negative light, makes you start thinking creatively about how you can effectively use this positive affix. An example of a positive affix would be something like this: Evaporation. Every time you kill an enemy, each member of your party gets a 1% haste buff for 20 seconds, stacking up to 50 times. This would encourage you to chain pull packs together to get the most effective use out of this buff. This would also encourage you to bring classes like Shadow Priest and Affliction Warlock that benefit greatly from chain pulling, as well as maybe one direct damage class to help prioritize a target down to get that buff chaining and going on for longer. Another example of a positive affix would be something like this: Encouraging. Being within 5 yards of at least one ally increases your critical strike chance by 2%, stacking up to 15%. This positive affix is cool because it means you will essentially have a buddy throughout the entire dungeon, and you'll need to synchronize your movement together, otherwise the buff will drop and you'll have to stack it up again. The cool thing about the positive affixes is that you can make it so they are beneficial for certain classes. For example, you can make a positive affix like this: Wounding. Your damage over time effects tick faster on targets with low HP. This would make multi-dot classes and classes with strong dots in general very good in Mythic Plus on any week affected by wounding. This helps diversify Mythic Plus compositions every week and makes the MDI more entertaining as you see them swap between affixes. You would most likely bring a class that can do a lot of upfront damage, and then your multi-dotters would just finish everything off as you chain into the next pack. Here's another example that could change up the composition you bring. Talented. Your direct damage spells hit up to 2 additional nearby targets within 5 yards, 4-second cooldown. This makes classes like Warrior with big executes shine in their damage window, or classes like Fire Mage that play with the Pyroclasm talent get more effectiveness out of their talent. This also would affect heals, so Paladins, for example, can hit 3 targets with their lay on hands if they are close enough together. Maybe we could even make it so it works with damage reduction, so the Druid could use Ironbark and it would hit 3 targets. You would have to play around this 4-second cooldown window. But that's just the other thing I love about positive affixes. It makes it so that you can actually change up your talent choices week from week, because there will be better options to synergize with the positive affix. There are plenty of other ideas for a positive affix, but you get the point. If positive affixes were to be added to Mythic Plus, this is what your key would look like. You would have the seasonal affix at the top, you would have a negative affix and then a positive affix. Something a little more spicy that I personally like is neutral affixes. I would love to see all the affixes reworked into something like the debuff from the last boss in Shrine of the Storm, which gives you a damage increase every stack but reduces your max HP by 10% per stack. This would make it so that every affix has a negative and a positive. It would make playing Mythic Plus a lot more interesting and entertaining in certain scenarios. An example of a neutral affix is Bashful. Running into an ally knocks you both back, but grants you both 30% haste for 20 seconds. Limit 1 stack. This affix is fun because you need to coordinate with your allies to have the maximum uptime on the buff. At the same time, it can be dangerous to do this mid-pull. And what about those pesky demon hunters in melee? Fun times await, that's for sure. Another example of this neutral affix is Enthusiast. Jumping gives you 20% mastery for 30 seconds, but each jump increases your next jump height by 20%. As you can imagine, you would want to jump often to get the buff, but as you keep doing it and put yourself at risk of dying to full damage or taking forever to land. Or maybe you stack your jump early on purpose so that you can do an insane skip later on. Either way, as you can imagine, these affixes are simple but interesting in one way or another. And I'm sure there are a lot better ideas out there than mine. A key with a neutral affix would most likely look like this. You would have your seasonal affix and then a neutral affix. As you've probably noticed, I haven't mentioned tyrannical or fortified yet. Well, let's talk about them here. Tyrannical is an absolutely awful affix, and I don't know a single person in the Mythic Plus community that enjoys it. All it does is make simple bosses take 10 years to kill and one-shot you when the scaling gets high enough. Fortified is less bothersome because you can crowd control trash, but it's still pointless. I understand where Blizzard was going with this. One week you'd be focused on bosses, and the next week you'd be focused on dungeon trash. But it's just not fun. We already have % scaling just from increasing the key difficulty. We don't need this unnecessary affix on top of that. It just makes it so that the dungeon is never balanced. We never get a non-tyrannical and non-fortified week, which means we never get to experience the dungeon as it was originally intended. It skews the feeling of the dungeon, and if I'm being honest, you should put more faith in the content you create, Blizzard. The dungeons can carry themselves without unnecessary affixes like this. The dungeons you've made in Shadowlands are exceptional, so there's no need for affixes like this. Please remove Tyrannical and Fortified. I think loot is probably the hardest thing to get right for Mythic Plus. Completing a +30 keystone on retail is harder than killing Mythic and Zoth if we're talking from a throughput perspective right now. Yet completing a +30 keystone, you get heroic raid item level appropriately. It just doesn't feel right at all. But at the same time, getting together a dedicated team, typically a 24-man roster to show up every raid night for quite a few months to clear the raid, is a much more difficult challenge. Especially because that guild most likely is planning on staying together for longer than just one raid tier. On top of that, the final raid boss of a raid tier typically has a lot more going on than a Mythic Plus dungeon when you're at that appropriate item level. So who should get the better rewards? I don't think that's a question that can be answered very fairly. Raiding for sure should give the best loot in the game, simply because of the commitment required, but it's not like Mythic Plus is easy. You have to have an insanely dedicated team to push +30 keys, especially with the current state Mythic Plus is in. You have to have people that can commit a whole week to pushing keys all day just to get anywhere on the ladder. I don't have a perfect answer for this, and I don't think many people do. However, one change I think that would make Mythic Plus feel more rewarding to players to push would be to have certain pieces of loot and set bonuses available at high difficulties only. For example, let's say a +10 is what you need for the highest reward in your weekly chest. Then I personally think a +15 should have at least one unique piece of loot that wasn't originally available in a dungeon. This piece of loot would have some seasonal fix on it that only works in Mythic Plus. And then perhaps at a +17, you unlock set bonuses, and these set pieces are only available from certain dungeons. This way Mythic Plus enthusiasts have loot they can work towards, which will also be available in their weekly loot. The loot should work in unison with the seasonal affix, so that way when the next season arrives, you're not re-grinding the same bonus as just a higher item level. A good example of a set bonus for the Prideful seasonal affix would be this. 2 set. You do 10% more damage against the Prideful mob. 4 set. The Prideful buff is 50% more effective on you. Some items could be something like this. Ring. While affected by Prideful, you zap nearby enemies for 1k damage every 5 seconds. Necklace. While not affected by Prideful, your cooldowns recover 10% faster. And so on. You get the point here. Let's create some unique stuff that makes Mythic Plus players feel like their time investment is worth it. But yeah, what did you think? There are probably some more problems with Mythic Plus than I brought up here, and I'm certainly sure there are, but I feel like I touched a lot of the important ones. This is just my opinion on some of the changes that I feel would greatly improve Mythic Plus for everyone involved, and I feel like these changes would show the Mythic Plus community that Blizzard cares about them, and that yes, Mythic Plus is one of the important 3 pillars that holds up World of Warcraft together. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate all the support I've been receiving lately, so for everyone that's been watching and helping me out, thank you so much, really, I really appreciate it. If you have any suggestions or improvements to any of the ideas covered in this video, then please let me know in the comments. I would absolutely love to hear some cool ideas for new affixes, or some cool ideas that would improve Mythic Plus as a whole. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day. I'll see you in the next one.